From Washington, this is VOA News. I'm Victor Beattie reporting. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson heads to Moscow for talks on a range of issues, including Syria. White House spokesman Sean Spicer said despite Russian ally Syria's use of chemical weapons last week, Tillerson will still be looking for ways to cooperate against Islamic State.
There's no question who acted in this case and what Syria did. And I think that we need to make sure that Russia fully understands the actions that Assad took, the commitments that Syria has made, and Russia has equally agreed to those same understanding. So that getting them back on the same page, first and foremost, would seem the logical step. But secondly, and I guess equally as important, is to make sure that the areas where we can find a commitment to defeat ISIS is something that we share.
At a G7 meeting in Italy Monday, British Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson said he believes Moscow needs a way out of that conflict.
If I think about the position of Vladimir Putin now, he's toxifying the reputation of Russia by his continual association with a guy who has flagrantly poisoned his own people.
British Prime Minister Theresa May and President Donald Trump spoke by phone, agreeing that in light of last week's missile strike on a Syrian airbase, a window of opportunity exists to persuade Russia to break ties with Mr. Assad. But analyst Alexei Moraviev of Australia's Curtin University said Russia will not easily abandon the Assad regime.
There may be an opportunity to negotiate a transition to a candidate who will be more moderate than Assad, suitable for the Russians, because the Russians have too much at stake in Syria.
Russia has rejected accusations the Syrian regime used chemical weapons against his own people. The UN Monday said at least 16 killed in South Sudan as militia targeted civilians based on their ethnicity in the town of Wau. This is VOA News. Egyptian security forces said they killed 7 suspected Islamic State sympathizers believed to be planning more attacks against Coptic Christians in the wake of Sunday's twin bombings of churches that killed 44 and wounded dozens more. Islamic State claimed responsibility. Monday's operation followed a 3-month state of emergency. Mona Makram Abeid, a political science professor at American University in Cairo, said Christians are particularly targeted by the IS group.
And I tell you this because I think that the terrorists have not been able to overthrow the government as they wanted, or to get over in their counterinsurgency against the police and the army. So the really weak part of this whole thing is to cause sectarian strife.
Meanwhile, families of the victims of Sunday's bombings gathered Monday at the monastery of St. Mina under heavy security. Sunday's targets, St. Mark's Cathedral in Alexandria, St. George's in Tanta, north of Cairo. Niger security forces said they killed nearly 60 members of Islamist insurgency Boko Haram who attacked a village in southeast Difa region. The defense ministry said 15 soldiers, 2 civilians, were wounded. Most of Boko Haram's attacks have occurred in Nigeria, but in recent years have spread to Cameroon, Niger, and Chad. U.S. officials, meanwhile, said the Trump administration is pushing forward with plans to sell aircraft to Nigeria to use in the fight against Boko Haram. They said the deal could be worth up to $600 million. The aircraft identified as the Super Tucano A-29 propeller-driven planes with reconnaissance, surveillance, and attack capabilities. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres Monday designated Pakistani education activist Malala Yousafzai as the UN Messenger of Peace.
I am proud to designate you the youngest ever United Nations Messenger of Peace, with a special focus on girls' education.
Yousafzai, the youngest ever Nobel Peace Prize laureate, receiving that international accolade in 2014 when she was just 17. She became an advocate for girls' education at the age of 11. At 15, she was brutally attacked by Taliban militants suffering severe wounds. Police in San Bernardino, California, said a special education teacher, one of her students, were fatally shot Monday by her estranged husband after he opened fire in her classroom. The gunman then killed himself. Lieutenant Mike Madden is a police spokesman.
This does appear to have been a murder-suicide with both male adult and female adult victim succumbing to injuries, with the male succumbing to a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
A second student was wounded near the site of a radical Muslim couple's mass shooting that left 14 dead in December 2015. Dylan Ruth, a self-proclaimed white supremacist, already sentenced to death in federal court for a 2015 shooting of 9 people in Charleston, South Carolina. I'm Victor Beattie.
That's the latest world news from VOA.